In this video we want to solve for x, and it could be a pretty complicated problem actually, because normally when we see some sort of radical or like a square root, we want to square it to get rid of the radical. But before we do that, we'd always want to isolate the radical by itself. In this situation, there's no way we could totally isolate one radical or isolate the radical on both sides by itself. We have a -1 here, so this one isn't isolated. If we get rid of it though and add it, then it becomes over here, and this radical isn't isolated, so we're kind of stuck. Let's go ahead and square both sides, because there's no way that we could isolate both radicals. So squaring both sides means that we have to rewrite this quantity 2 times. So I'm going to have 5 minus 5x, the square root of that, minus 1, and we have to write that one more time. The fortunate thing though is that this side, the radical, will cancel out. So we're left with -4 minus 5x. And that cancels out because if we rewrote the square root of -4 minus 5x in radical form, it'll look like this. It's like raising it to the 1/2 power. And to cancel that out, we would square it, because a power to another power we multiply, and that would give us 2/2, which is just 1, so there we go. Now here's the tricky thing about this problem. We have to distribute these 2 terms. So now if we take this radical and multiply it by that radical, the radicals cancel out, so we're just left with 5 minus 5x. Okay, it's that quantity. It's the same thing as like if you took the square root of 3 times the square root of 3, multiplied those together to get the square root of 9, which would equal 3. So those radicals cancel out. Now this radical times the -1 just means that we would write a -5 minus 5x, square root of that. So now we continue with this stuff. We got to take this number and distribute it. So -1 times all this under the radical just becomes a negative, and then everything under the radical. Whoops. That's going to be 5 minus 5x. Again, we're taking the square root of that. And then lastly, -1 times a -1 is going to be a +1. And that all still equals -4 minus 5x. Okay, now we got to combine all of our like terms on the left side. So we have a 5 here, and we're going to add that with this +1 here, so that becomes 6. And then we have a -5x, and we can't combine that with anything just yet, so I'm going to write that out. And then we have a negative square root of 5 minus 5x minus another square root of 5 minus 5x, so that means we have 2 of those. Whoops. And then we already added this one to the 5 over here, so that equals -4 minus 5x. We want to isolate the radical now. Okay, we want to get that by itself. So what can we do? Well, let's start by subtracting 6. So we could do that from both sides, and then we could add 5x, so add 5x over here as well, and that'll eliminate some of the stuff over here on the left. So those cancel out. We're left with -2 times the square root of 5 minus 5x equals -4 minus -6. Well, -4 minus 6 will be a -10, and then those cancel. So now we're almost there, but to finish isolating the radical part, we want to divide out that -2. So negative 2 over negative 2 is 1, so that cancels. I'm going to be left with the square root of 5 minus 5x. Negative 10 divided by negative 2 is a positive 5. And now finally I have that radical by itself. So let's get rid of it by squaring it, which means we have to square this right side as well. So we have just 5 minus 5x equals 5 squared. That's going to be 25. Alright, let's give us some more room here. And then we just solve. So we need to get x's by itself. So subtract 5 from both sides. That's going to leave us with negative 5x equaling 20. And then divide both sides by negative 5, which means we have x equals a negative 4. Now that's going to be our final answer there, but we have to check to see if that works. So we got to plug in negative 4 into our final answer, which is all the way up here. So let's get rid of this, and for some reason that changed the size, but let's plug in that negative 4. So a negative 4 for this x will be multiplied by a negative 5, so that's going to give us a positive 20, and then 20 plus the 5 is going to be the square root of 25, and then we're subtracting 1, and then again we're plugging in a negative 4 for x, so negative 4 times a negative 5 is going to be positive 20, and then negative 4 plus that positive 20 is going to be a 16. So that's going to all be under the radical. So actually I'll move this over here a little bit. The square root of 25 is going to be 5, and then minus 1, that's going to be 4, and then the square root of 16 is just 4. So the left side equals the right side. That means that coming down here, x equals negative 4. That answer checks out, and that will be our final answer.